This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1144, Creator Spotlight on Gerry Conway.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. This is episode 1144. It's a Creator Spotlight episode, this time on the sadly recently departed Gerry Conway. I'm joined by my co-host for these episodes, Nathan Struck. Nathan, say hello to the good people.
Hi.
So thank you for joining me for this episode, Nate. So obviously we've recently, when people have passed away, sadly, that's a moment for us to kind of make sure we go back and look at their work and kind of recognize them and, get to say hopefully good things about some of their work. But I'm curious what your relationship is with the work of Gerry Conway. Have you read much of it, or do you know more of him by reputation?
Yeah, I guess I would maybe say I don't know. I probably have read a number of books that he's written. I know the name. It's not a name that I guess I tracked. I don't... Yeah, I just, he's not someone whose background or bibliography was in the front of my mind. But then going through even, just with this book of the month moment, this Creator Spotlight rather, I found that I like his stuff, and I realized I must have read him more often. So I guess the only way for me to know is pull up every single book he's ever written and just go through a checklist and check them off. Actually, you know what? While we're maybe proceeding with part of the show, why don't I just give it a gander?
He's done a tremendous amount. It's interesting, one thing about Gerry, he broke into the industry super young. Like his first, the book we're going to talk about today, which is one of his earliest works, was Astonishing Tales, issue 3 from 1970. He would have been 18 years old. That's crazy. He's born in 1952, breaks into the industry super young. He's writing Spider-Man. He kills off Gwen Stacy when he's 21 years old. That's kind of crazy. It was a very different time, obviously, back then. Jim Shooter was writing comics in his teens. So people got in early, but he got in especially early, which is part of what, he feels like he's been around so long, but he was still relatively young. He was only 74, I believe, when he passed away, or about to turn 74. So it's kind of interesting how, he had this very long career in comics, and yet, he got in so young that we kind of take it for granted. It's interesting as well, when the book I have you reading today, he was writing stuff as, relatively recently. The story, the last one we're going to talk about is from 2019, so he would, he's 67 at that point, still writing comics, still coming back. In the 2010s, he actually had kind of a resurgence. He did a stealth miniseries for Amazing Spider-Man. I call it stealth miniseries because it was during that period where Marvel did 0.1 issues, but they did 0.1s in a row. It was 16.1, 17.1, 18.1. It was essentially a 5-issue Amazing Spider-Man miniseries, but they kind of cloaked it under the regular Amazing Spider-Man numbering so that they could, sell more copies and people would think it was more important. It was actually really well done. He also did an Amazing Carnage series in the mid 2010s. Which was really kind of Tomb of Dracula inspired as well. He created Firestorm at DC, had a lot of long-running projects at DC as well.
He created Firestorm.
Yeah. He was also a very short-lived, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks, editor-in-chief of Marvel at one point in his mid-20s. So this guy did a lot, and the big thing that you won't see in any bibliography is he had a very extensive career writing in television as well. Because he kind of transitioned into TV. I believe he wrote a lot of Law & Orders. He actually wrote the first episode of the Spider-Man animated series, I believe, Night of the Lizard. So, again, this guy knew Spider-Man very well. He had a very... I think people really look back on it fondly. He came back to Spider-Man in the late 80s, and he wrote... late 80s, early 90s, and he wrote both Web of Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man at the same time, and co-created Tombstone. So the guy was still generating, new ideas and content. He also wrote the original Clone Saga, so you have read some Conway, at least from that, in terms of what he was doing then. So, I mean, I first remember reading Gerry Conway's material in the Clone Genesis trade paperback from, I think, 96, which had Amazing Spider-Man, I think, 140 to 150. So that was kind of my first introduction to Gerry, and obviously being a huge Spider-Man fan, I've devoured all his work there. And always pleased to read more of his work. So this will be a fun experience, I hope, for you.
Yeah, that's some really good kind of overall description of his career. I'm looking here and scanning through, like all these Justice League of America books he wrote, a bunch of Action Comics, really like a little bit of everything, it seems. There's some significant Batman stuff, and then, of course, Firestorm, Jonah Hex, and then it gets into the Marvel Comics stuff. Obviously, like you mentioned, Spider-Man, amazing and spectacular at the same time. Ghost Rider, I mean, a little bit, right? Almost everywhere. More significant, Fantastic Four. I was trying to think of how many times have I seen his name on Epic Collections? And I guess just the Epic Collections that you would see his name on, I don't have a lot of these. I don't have the deep catalog of Spider-Man epics that you do. I kind of start around the 80s, in and around Kraven's Last Hunt, whereas you go further back into the 70s, which is really your favorite decade, your favorite era of Spider-Man?
Of Spider-Man?
Yeah.
You know what, maybe. I mean, the 60s is really special, too, but it's interesting, when I read, when we were doing this, I read issues 129, I was like, I'll keep going. This is really this is fun. I really love the artwork of that time. There's just something about the era. As I get older, and this kind of bleeds into something we talked about off podcast, but, I really like how when people would fight in old school comics, you didn't always see costumes ripping and blood and bruises and all that stuff. It was just people just getting into fisticuffs, but it wasn't brutal. And I kind of miss that about comics. Those kind of simpler days. Ironically, I was just reading 2008's X-Force, which is as bloody as you can get. And it's just kind of a massacre on every page. So reading some of this older stuff is really fun because you're still telling good stories, still have good stakes, but you don't have certain maybe visual things that they would do these days, like the death of Green Goblin and the death of Gwen Stacy. If you did that as a modern comic, it would be much more, excessive with its violence and its portrayal of the violence or the ramifications of violence more so than anything. So, anyways, let's jump into the first book we're going to talk about today. This is 19.
Hold on. Before we go there, I mean, you sent me to TV, so I am noticing how influential, or at least how the effect that Conway must have had on me, or contributed to my childhood. Look at these shows that he's got, Hercules, the Legendary Journeys, 5 episodes from that, and then Dino Saucers, 1 episode. My Little Pony, the Centurions. He did a bunch of episodes for Centurions. Transformers, Forever is a Long Time Coming. Money is Everything. Paul probably sat up in his chair wherever he is right now. 5 episodes of G.I. Joe. This is not a small amount of content. And a Batman animated series, Appointment in Crime Alley and Second Chance. So quite significant. And it's sad that in his passing, I'm now sitting up and taking notice myself of what a great career that he had. But sorry to delay you about the jumping.
No, that's okay. I mean, and again, live action stuff, he did 16 episodes of Diagnosis Murder back in the 90s. That was a long running show. He had a very, he had a good television writing career even without the comic book stuff.
Yeah.
But then we love him for the comics. So
where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's go back to 1970. This is Astonishing Tales, issue 3. This is technically issue is featuring Kazar and Dr. Doom, but we're just talking about the Kazar story, which is Kazar, Lord of the Jungle, back to the Savage Land. So I found this absolutely fascinating because I had no idea that Zaladin and Garrock and these characters were that predated X-Men era. Obviously they're Savage Land kind of characters in the where we usually see them, but I've always known them in the context of X-Men. See Garrock in the X-Men animated series. You see Zaladin obviously had a huge impact on the Chris Claremont, Jim Lee era of X-Men with Rogue and Magneto in the Savage Land fighting Zaladin. So that was that's how I think of those characters. So seeing a story where they're nowhere to be found and it's a Kazar story, I found was fascinating.
to see, I'm like, wow, why do I like these pencils? Why is Kazar's hair so beautiful and luscious? Oh, it's Barry Smith. So an earlier Barry Smith, he's still got it. There's still the DNA of later on what will become. I don't think this is overselling it, a master work or a master artist in the field. But it's very enjoyable pencils. The bold colors work really well as well. So it was surprisingly enjoyable. And also credit there too, where credit's due. Gerry Conway doing his best, and I would argue better. The over verbose Stan Lee effect of it all, to bring in the narration styles perhaps of a foregone era, the pulp, the trades, the adventure fiction books that kids would whatever it was, 5 cents, and they would be able to read a book that influenced so many people. The Flash Gordons, this highfalutin verbiage. He's quite young here still, right? This is 1970, you said?
1970, yeah.
Yeah, he does a great job. It's fun to read this.
So
I might be so bold. Can I be bold?
Yeah.
This, of the 3 things we read, this was my most I enjoyed this the most.
Really?
Yes. Now, I also enjoyed the Spider-Man coming up for different reasons, but this, just for what it is, I think it's everything. It's the art and the color and the absolute silliness of it, but Conway makes it really fun. They're chewing the scenery, and Garrock is just, eating the drapes, and so is Zaladane, right? But that's her character. That's the perfect Zaladane of it all. So,
for sure.
I don't know. If I couldn't help but imagine all of this put to narration or oration, having voice actors coming in and read this. It would be really fun.
There's a sequence here where Zabu and Kazar are trekking, and then suddenly someone shows one of the, I guess, I hesitate to say natives of the area, but one of the people kind of attacks them, and they have this really knockdown, drag out fight. And on the digital version, this would be page 9. Kazar kind of grabs him in the second panel, almost like scooping under the guy's mouth and grabbing his head back, and it's it's rough, but in a good way. You feel, again, this is one of those things where you feel the visceral nature of the moment, but not in an excessive way, but still a way that makes you take notice.
Yeah, I mean, just even the sound effects, and of course the dialogue. When Kazar commands, all in the jungle must obey. The folds on obey, right? So I have to emphasize the obey, and then just right, as you can see that motion, and the abdominal muscles, right, are being kind of stretched out. Very visceral, very. You can almost hear the wet thud, right, as the meat hitting meat. It's quite intense, and I know that it's mostly a throwaway nothing silliness, a way to kind of just move readers along and make them feel like they've earned or that they spent their money well. But yeah, even when what is his name again? They get the name of this guy who's his friend /
Do they name him?
Antagonist? Yeah. Is it Tonga? Hold Tonga. I said hold.
Oh, okay, I guess you're right.
Yeah. On that same page that you mentioned, and then when Tonga is getting out of the water, again, that's the Windsor Smith. When you can see there's certain panels where he's really adding a lot of great line work and rendering, the water splashing off of him. Maybe too much work for a panel that small, but there's a lot of, I don't know. Yeah, everything feels like it has weight in this.
What's impressive, both the writer and the artist, is that this is 10 pages. But it feels like a very full 10 pages. It's a real skill. I've talked about this a lot in modern years, where Tom DeFalco has been doing a lot of these 10-page stories where they'll kind of parachute them into anniversary issues, whatever the case might be, often with Ron Friends, and they'll do a 10-page story. And it's a lost art because a lot of people just can't do it these days. There's a lot of writers who can't even write a 20-page story without it being longer. Doing a done-in-one is a lost art. Being able to do a 10-issue story is even harder. So there's so much done here that you almost forget that it's 10 pages, because you have a whole reflection on everything about Garrock. You have them traveling back to the Savage Land and doing kind of journeying towards Zaladane. You have sequences with Zaladane on her own. just trying to declare war on the rest of the Savage Land. Like, there's a lot going on
being
here.
fabulous.
Oh, yeah, so fabulous. It's interesting you mentioned with the hair. There's certain panels by Barry Windsor Smith where it looks kind of Jack Kirby-ish still, and then you have others where like, no, that's his own style bleeding through. Like it's almost like you're seeing him evolve on the page, where you can see certain influences in certain pages, and in others you see him becoming himself.
Yeah, it's interesting too how he designs some of the costuming, especially what is this, the digital comic, page 4 of Zaladane, and it's a camera shot behind her, and then there's these, I guess, emissaries, holders of the flames, just ridiculous, ostentatious, beyond sci-fi costumes that he goes, harder than anyone, deserves to go or should go for a comic that's just kind of like maybe quote unquote a nothing. But yeah, I can see what you mean. Even like the very first splash page with Garrock and the chunkiness, like he is the petrified man, so he is made of rock, as it were, but he has to move and be humanoid. But that does feel like those thick black heavy inks makes me feel the Kirby a bit. So I can see what you're talking about. Now,
the big question I ask you every time we do this is, after reading this issue, would you want to read the next part of the story?
Yeah, if Barry Windsor Smith, again, Barry's doing a lot of work here. I'm giving credit, I hope I am, to the multiple talents that are here, but they work together in a way that, yeah, I want to know. I would like to see more of this. I want to see more of this art. Maybe I should just keep sliding my finger over here and seeing if I can get to the next issue then. How about that?
It's still by Barry Smith, so it's interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, it credits Jerry as Gerard Conway, which I don't think I've ever seen him credited that way. Gerard.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems very uppity, very formal.
Yeah. So okay.
Oh my gosh, he's fighting a unicorn in the next episode, the next issue. Amazing.
Yeah. No. You're right though. It's a great combination of like a young writer and artist, right? They're both very young, just kind of getting in, and you could see both of them kind of developing their own skill. Like, I would love to have known, how did he even get this gig writing a mid-story Astonishing Tales story? Like, he's not starting it off, it already was going, so who started it?
This is crazy, dude. Like, I'm just going through this, the art, oh my gosh, Barry Windsor Smith. Incredible. All right, well, I'm downloading this comic too.
Any final thoughts about this particular issue?
No, it is what it is. It's short and sweet and silly and a lot of fun. And I don't know what to tell you. Thank you for picking this.
So we're going to do a giant jump, though. Because he worked so long, the jumps between, because we do 3 issues, the jumps between them become so big. So we go from 1970 to 1990. We're jumping over writing Spider-Man. We're for the first time on Amazing Spider-Man, killing off Gwen Stacy, ending the Silver Age, moving on, doing the original Clone Saga, moving to DC, as you said, working on Justice League, doing the the Detroit era, doing all sorts of really impactful stuff, launching Firestorm. He now has come back to Marvel. It's 1990, and we're looking at an issue of Web of Spider-Man, which was, Web of Spider-Man, I think, struggled the most for a sense of identity in the pre-Todd McFarlane era. Although at this point, I think that might have just started. But you had Amazing Spider-Man, which was the flagship. You had Spectacular, which had started in the 70s. And then in the mid-80s, you have Web of Spider-Man. And Web of Spider-Man, I would say, floundered for a little bit, trying to have a sense of, well, what was it trying to say? Now, certain editors at Marvel would say, okay, they would come on and say, like, okay, I'm editing the Spider-Man books. I want each one to have its own identity. So for a while, Web of Spider-Man was about him working for, I think it was a specific magazine. It wasn't the Daily Bugle. So to try and have like kind of different supporting cast. Spectacular did that a lot in the mid-70s. That Deborah Whitman was one of the big characters that was used in Spectacular. So Web has never had as much of a sense of identity in and of itself. Now again, Jerry wrote Web and Spectacular, so when he wrote both, you had dovetailing stories between the two. So it was almost like you were getting 2 issues a month instead of one of the bigger story by Gerry Conway. On one, he had Sal Buscema on Spectacular doing the art, and on Web, he had Alex Saviuk who is the one who's actually illustrating the issue we're talking about, which is Web of Spider-Man 65. This is from 1990. It's an Acts of Vengeance Aftermath issue. On the cover, we have Spider-Man trying to get away from a lot of different villains. We've got Graviton, we've got the Brothers Grimm, the Trapster, Titania, and Goliath. And he's going towards Kingpin. So, had you read this before?
No. But I know this era. I have, at least I still have it. I had as a kid one issue of Web with this artist. And I guess it would have been Gerry Conway as well. I don't remember which issue it was. But,
potentially. Could have been him, for sure.
The point's moved right now. But it was the same era of Acts of Vengeance, I believe. Because this is aftermath of Acts of Vengeance. So I think it must have been one of the issues of the proper Acts of Vengeance. So pretty close to this, it would have been in time.
Yeah, it could have been like the issue or two after.
Yeah.
So what was your...
So not this one. But,
what were your thoughts on this? Because this is interesting. I'm trying to, like, when I read it, I'm trying to think, well, what does this say about Gerry as a writer? How does he move the, kind of the story forward? There's a lot going on. This is probably one of my favorite things about kind of pre-2000 comics is subplots. Because you don't really see subplots once you hit the trade era. But in the pre-trade era, you have a lot of subplots. So you have things going on here, like you have Mary Jane, watching Normie and then accidentally finding the Green Goblin costume, which at this point, the next issue, I believe, he becomes the heroic Green Goblin. This is before, that kind of descent into madness that we eventually see with not long after, I think it's like a year later, by JMD. But this is like a little bit more fun. I would say in general, like, you have a lot of villains fighting Spider-Man. It's a lot of, kind of crazy shenanigans. It's trying to give you fast-paced entertainment. I would say some of the villains obviously were maybe not written the best, but I feel like it's possible that more modern writers that I'm used to wrote them in a way that fully realized their potential, and so reading them before anyone had figured out, like Graviton's a big one, because I remember Graviton as a Thunderbolts villain and doing a lot of crazy stuff to the Thunderbolts, so seeing him here and not really being given, he should be a titanic threat. But at the time, no one wrote him that way. So this isn't Gerry's fault. This is Gerry writing the character as he was currently presented at the time. But it is one of those things where I have to kind of remind myself that is true.
Yeah, I mean, this is, what was it? Nicieza said something to the effect of, I don't know if this is at all just my memory, a false memory or something that is true. But I think I recall him saying in an interview or something to the effect, like, the Thunderbolts need their Magneto. And like Graviton is someone of a power level who's like, he's gravity to magnetism. They're both like related forces in terms of like the forces of the universe. So he should be top tier. I want to get him there. I can maybe redeem this villain, as it were, in the eyes of the reader. So I also remember that era of, this is a character I don't know much about, and now I love him. And oh my gosh, they put him in HeroClix, and I have to have that unique. I think he was a unique.
Yeah.
Even though the costume is somewhat silly, still I like it better than the Netheria classic costume. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't know how I feel about Savic's art either. Like, there are times when I really, really like it. There's a grittiness to it that is undeniably, late 80s, early 90s New York that I think is really, really perfect for setting. In a digital comic, it's page 11, the first panel of the Daily Bugle. It just looks... He really does a great job of showing a wrecked husk of a building. It feels like the city is grimy, even when he's not doing particular renderings on the back streets. It feels like there's dirt and an earthiness wherever you go, and so I do like that. I don't know how I feel about his Spider-Man. At times I feel like it's overly rendered, or like the mask doesn't quite work for me, or sometimes the proportions are off. But he has a lot of, I can't deny, he has a lot of energy. He's doing some good storytelling. There's just something about, I don't know, his choices that I think there's a reason why that was the only Spider-Man comic that when I was a kid, when it came to like, oh, there's an option to look at the not the turnstile, what's it called? The spinner rack at like a grocery store or something, or a convenience store, and I was not looking for Web of Spider-Man because of this. So I mean, it's just a personal thing. I'm not coming at him. I don't think it's bad, but it's not. There's a reason, I guess, why it's not my favorite of the three. I see what you're saying. I agree with I like the subplots as well. I just don't think the villain stuff goes anywhere with Goliath and Graviton to my interests. The normie stuff and the goblin stuff is of more interest to me, and then we barely get any of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like again, it's a subplot. They're seeding up something else. Yeah. A lot of this is kind of building off of what the Acts of Vengeance was about, and the idea that Spider-Man doesn't have cosmic powers anymore. Now, what is he going to do? How does he kind of defend himself? On the art side, on the page 4 of the digital version, I really love the shot of Spider-Man hanging on to the plane. There's just something about the kind of you feel the motion of the moment. That his arms are about to be ripped out of their sockets. There's just something about you feel the speed at which everything is kind of moving. So I do like that kind of stuff. I agree. Unfortunately, I remember reading Maximum Carnage and then having them. I don't think as a kid I owned any of the web issues, and I never felt like I was upset about that. And I feel bad saying that because there's a lot of artistry that goes in here. He's just not my favorite Spider-Man artist. I preferred others of the time. When I'm reading Maximum Carnage and I'm going from, Mark Bagley on one to Tom Lyle to Sal Buscema to Alex Saviuk, he did always kind of feel like the odd man out artistically compared to the other three. Now he also did, he also launched the Spider-Man, the adaptation of the animated show, and I felt that when he adapted his style a little bit to be more similar to the show, it actually made me appreciate his artwork more. I think he's really tremendously talented, but I just never quite completely gelled with his look on Spider-Man. I think almost from the way he lays out the pages I like, but I think sometimes it was that in the actual finishing or execution that I didn't quite completely felt like it nailed it.
And are these his inks? I'm sorry, I'm on that page right now. Is he inking this, or he's not?
I don't think he's inking. I would imagine inking was by Keith Williams.
I wonder how it would feel if he was. Maybe there's some work of his where he's doing his own things. Maybe that's something that would be really beneficial for him. I don't know.
That's possible.
Again, you're right. He's not a bad artist. He's way better than I am. But there's just we don't always vibe with everyone's style. That's all.
Now, from a writing perspective, I loved how it did have that kind of old school comic mentality. Like when you open it up and it's like asking you as a reader a question. Like I kind of miss narration like this. It's like, did you ever dream you were falling? Did you ever wake from that dream in a cold sweat, heart pounding? Like it really gets you going because it's like asking you a question. It's involving the reader. It's not just kind of presenting the story. It's getting you involved in it in a different way. And I really like that. That kind of it feels like I'm damning it with faint praise to save throwback. But it is this, older style of narration that unfortunately we don't see much anymore, and I really appreciate. And as a reader, I'm like, well, I'm more interested in what's going on now because you're making me understand what is this feeling that Peter Parker is experiencing right now. So I really like the writing in this story. I think that at times I think it was better than the art, to be honest, in terms of kind of selling some of the moments. Some of it's a little cheeseball, like when you have all the villains kind of fighting with each other and, talking about the Chameleon was offering them money, and I'm like, well, Graviton cares not for these things. But generally speaking, I did dig it. I kind of like the Chameleon's just this kind of interesting asshole. Like, he doesn't really kind of care. He's just kind of being a prick. I kind of dug it. I don't know why. Because I think he's a character that's hard to pin down. Kind of, I guess, on purpose, but, he was originally, introduced as a spy, but oftentimes we don't always get a clear sense of why Chameleon's even bothering with stuff, so I kind of like to hear that he's just kind of messing around. So overall, I thought this was entertaining. Again, another subplot was the whole Thomas Fireheart owning the Bugle and now not really caring necessarily about rebuilding it because that's not what he was kind of there for. He was trying to make good on kind of this honor debt to Spider-Man, which was to buy the Bugle and only be positive about Spider-Man because of all the years that the Bugle was against him, which was an interesting kind of way to go. I really enjoy seeing very early, not that early, but Eric Jostin, stories. Like, we are used to him as Atlas, and this is when he was not a good guy. But he's not a particularly bad guy either. He's just kind of...
No, he's just a meathead.
Yeah, he's just a meathead, and I found that very entertaining. And again, seeing how Spider-Man fights the various villains, how they're trying to kind of go after the Kingpin, and calling him Fat Man, I found it was enjoyable.
It just makes you want and wish, and I know this is not the topic of our conversation, more Thunderbolts-related stuff in Marvel United would be great. It'd be awesome to have a separate Graviton villain, and each of these individuals would be cool to have. That they're screaming Mimi, even if it's an assortment of Masters of Evil, just to have them there to touch that kind of Thunderbolts connection. But one can dream.
Any other thoughts about this particular issue?
No, it's not bad. It's just, of the three, not my favorite. It didn't really grab me. It wasn't as a unique experience to me.
Okay. Next up, we're going to move to 2019. This is as part of the 80th anniversary of Marvel. They put out a bunch of kind of one-shots where they brought back older creators, kind of telling new stories. This was Amazing Spider-Man Going Big. There was another one called Sensational Spider-Man Self-Improvement. I only bring it up because that one had a story by Tom DeFalco and Ron Frenz, of which I own a page from. So it's kind of in that era. The main I would hesitate to say the main story. The first story is plot and script by Gerry Conway, artwork by Mark Bagley. We will talk about that in a moment, but I did want to mention that also in this issue we have Eric Larson coming back to the character. We have Ralph Macchio and Todd Knock doing a story as well. So you have some fun stuff. Actually, if you do read the Eric Larson story, which he wrote, penciled and inked, I do like that Laura Martin, the colorist, does a very, at least for the first page, has a very old school style in terms of the art. This would be page 22 of the digital version. After that, it becomes much more modern, but there's just something about that first page feels like it was ripped out of 1991. And I really like that. And when you first look at it, I'm like, oh, wow, what's this? This is a nice throwback, because it really clicks into my love of the old school kind of 4-color kind of look of comics, and then after that it goes much more modern. So then, a little bit less visually interesting to me in terms of being a little bit more of an old style, but I just thought I'd mention that first.
Classic. Nothing wrong with that.
No. So let's talk about this. So what I found fascinating about this, because I hadn't read it in a while, was reading the story, is that it doesn't feel like your typical story that's plotted, kind of thrown into an anniversary issue. And what I mean by that is usually they feel much more inventory. They don't feel like they're as grounded in the continuity of the time. Usually they feel much more kind of apart from it. And this felt very different than that, because you have... I can't even remember what was going on with the Coyote at this time and the kind of spot powers. I can't remember, but I read this character when it first came out in Daredevil. But I give props to Gerry Conway for, not just kind of going with your traditional big Spidey villain either, but using something more modern and different and trying to kind of do something different in terms of the storytelling and how the character is fighting against something. The whole character of Christy Watson was a supporting character from his Spectacular and Web of Spider-Man days. It was the cousin of Mary Jane Watson, who had an eating disorder. So I like that they kind of went back to that. Anyways, I'm imagining you've never read this before, correct?
Nope.
So what were your
but I enjoyed it.
What were your initial thoughts?
Nice to see Bagley back in the saddle. It doesn't disappoint. I found that his Mary Jane, I felt, has improved. I just felt there was something about the way he was having her emote and express her concerns about her cousin that was very heartfelt and very meaningful. So I know he's good at talking heads, but usually very pretty heads with very nice doe eyes. I know I'm certainly complimenting him for his ability to create meaningful expressions. I just thought it was particularly good here. I really like the talking heads, which is not a kind of thing that you usually expect to hear from a superhero comic. I was more interested in those pictures than almost any of these superheroics themselves. Also, props to Gerry Conway. I found this to be the most meaningful of the stories, because he's obviously making social commentary on state systems and institutions and people taking advantage of loopholes. And when you make something illegal, right, he's putting some philosophy in there. People are not going to stop doing it. Let's just find different ways to do it. And so people are preying on illegal immigrants, trying to suggest and show that maybe to be heartless and unempathetic to people who are in a situation of immigration, lawful or not, don't deserve to be preyed upon or sex trafficked or human trafficked. So that is a meaningful commentary on the real world. And so that's, I don't know anything about the coyote, and I don't know anything about this symbiote coyote. Is there a symbiote coyote here? That's why the spider sense isn't going off. It's a spot symbiote coyote.
I don't remember if there's actually any symbiote involved. Just looks like it.
So the coyote looks like this.
Yes.
This is. Oh, okay. Then never mind. It's just giving symbiote.
It does give that energy, no. And it's interesting, like, as you mentioned, what I liked about it is that, it's doing social commentary without beating you over the head about it either. Like, it's wearing its politics on its sleeve, but in a casual way, if that makes sense. In a way that, again, makes a lot of sense for Spider-Man as a character. Like, when Spider-Man's saying to Christy, like, you could have gotten killed looking into this human smuggling operation. She's like, yeah, but sometimes it's hard to worry about yourself when there are other people in real trouble. I mean, that line really works on Spider-Man of all people, right? Like, this is a guy who constantly will put himself in harm's way to save everybody. There's versions of him where he's like, doesn't want anyone to die, wants to save everyone. So that felt very impactful that she'd be able to kind of zero in on that for someone that she doesn't really know. But, it's an important ethos for this character to have. And I don't know if Christy Watson had really made any appearances since Jerry had written her. But I really liked how he wrote her. I liked how he framed the story, because you have the fight going on against the coyote, but then you also have the flashbacks to kind of how this happened, how Peter had the discussion with MJ, he's going to go look for Christy, and how that all kind of evolves as he's trying to hunt her down. I thought it was really cool. The framing device is that someone has this whole thing in their crosshairs. How early did you cop to the fact that it was definitely Punisher?
I mean, it almost, I don't know, is this a signifier Punisher? Like, back to his initial appearance that has the crosshairs on it, it reminded me immediately of that. So I'm like, Punisher? It doesn't help that the narration boxes are black with, like, a very stark white background, like the Punisher colors. So they're signaling to you pretty early on. Mm-hmm. I honestly didn't really care about any of that inclusion. I felt it was kind of just like a throwaway almost, and like it's supposed to be this reveal at the end that he's there. I'm like, okay. He's like, I don't call it justice, I call it punishment. Okay, cool, yeah, that's your name. Like, I don't know, maybe it's supposed to go somewhere after this, or is reacting to a previous Punisher storyline that I haven't read. But yeah, I don't know. It's cool when Punisher interacts with Spider-Man comics, because he originated in Spider-Man, but wasn't really meaningful to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's one of those things where, like, I don't think it needed to be there. It was an interesting extra element to give, and it's interesting because as you go through the story, at times you forget it's there, that it's happening, right? Because it's just like a panel here, a panel there. But I guess, it was a way to kind of, at the end of the day, he did create the Punisher. So, I mean, it's his character. Now, it's interesting because Jerry had a complicated association with the character in later years, obviously, because in the States, when people, started using the Punisher logo in a way that was not what it's intended and not what it's supposed to represent. And so Jerry was very vocal about that. Now, I think this kind of came after that was happening, but maybe that's part of what, is trying to kind of reclaim the character. And Marvel, Marvel definitely kind of stepped back from Frank Castle for a couple of years. While this was happening, they brought in a new character with a slightly different logo. They weren't really leaning into the Frank Castle of it all. Now it's kind of gone back the other way. They're bringing him back. But I don't know if you're watching Daredevil Born Again, but they're definitely kind of leaning into the social commentary that, like, that's not what this is for. And so, like, the bad guys right now are, like, wearing that logo and thinking that they're like Frank Castle, that he's one of them. Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again was definitely about this, and that Frank Castle's like, no, that's not what you are. Like, that's not okay. So I like that. So there is that kind of sense of social commentary there.
Yeah, that's fair. And the fact that, it's a character that he wrote and he wants to dabble or wants to play in that sandbox, great. It doesn't, the comic isn't hurt by it. But it does feel like, hey, there's this guy here, and maybe Bagley wanted to draw him also, and was down with it, and it's fun. But yeah, you're right; it doesn't really add a whole lot to the story. But Because again, it's like, oh, Punisher was there, right? It's this dramatic irony that we knew he was there, and he was about to pull the trigger, and he didn't do it, and at the end he appears. There's no meeting with Peter or having a debate about what's justice. So I wish maybe there'd been more of that and less of the Coyote standing around.
I wonder, are we led to assume that Coyote just gets murdered here?
Yeah, I think it is. It's one of the takeaways, right? The ambiguous ending where he's just like, I'm going to do my murdering thing. It's not called justice. It's called punishment, and I'm going to punish them, and they're all immobilized. So, yeah, possibly.
It looks like he did survive.
Okay.
I mean, given his powers, it's probably, of all characters who have survived obvious, gunfire deaths, it's probably easier to understand why he'd be able to do so.
So Frank sucks at shooting, is what we're supposed to understand.
Well, when he's shooting a guy using Dark Force energy, I guess so.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think, before this, Coyote had appeared in Daredevil Volume 3, 19, 20, 21, 26, then this, and then in an issue of Ravencroft, where he escaped at that point, and I don't think we've seen him since. So it looks like he's had 6 appearances. So if you want to collect them all, you can.
Yeah, we can do a whole spotlight on this character one day if you want.
Absolutely.
No.
What I thought was interesting is that you're using a character like Frank Castle. You show him at the end, but you don't show him in a way that shows the iconography. You don't have the logo, right? In fact, if you didn't know who the Punisher is, you wouldn't even know that this was the Punisher.
Yep. Except for punishment, but he doesn't say Punisher.
Exactly.
Which is not enough.
No, so it is interesting. If you give this to someone as kind of like their first Spider-Man comic, weird choice, but they read this comic and you're like, I don't know what this means.
Yeah. He should have him look in the camera and be like, I'm the Punisher, and I'm going to punish this guy, and look at my shirt.
Well, something, right? Something that says, yeah, it is interesting that it's not spelled out direct. I mean, it is spelled out, but only if you already know. And if you don't already know, then you don't know. And, you could think he was a cop.
This is what happens, right? Is this Bendis? Who does this? I think it's Bendis, right? In New Avengers? Where he's like, who is that? It's like, don't worry, they always say their name. What are you talking about? Maybe it's Daredevil. Is it Daredevil?
I think it's Daredevil, yeah.
With Malieve, and then he's like, it's the Jester or whatever. And he's like, see, told you, it's the Jester, right? This is what happens when you don't say your name, and you don't go around telling everybody.
Mm-hmm. What I did like about Bagley's work on the Spider-Man art here, and I think he did other Spider-Man art around this time, maybe a year or two later on the regular book again, is that he had done Ultimate for so long, and Ultimate Spider-Man was so skinny. It was nice to see a very clearly adult Peter that he was drawing. This felt, especially that first page. I really like that first page where, you have Spider-Man's back kind of jumping into the fray, and I liked how Bagley draws the spider on the back. He does it in a very particular way that I've always enjoyed. So I mean, the art was very solid stuff. And again, I really like the overall story. You're reading kind of a Dunham one, but it feels lived in. And I guess that's more my point, is that it feels like it's taking place in a time that I want to kind of read the next comic. Not that it's very clearly a Dunham one, kind of inventory issue, which often happens with these anniversary issues. You kind of get something that doesn't feel like it's tethered in any particular time and place in Spider-Man mythos. It just tells a story, and whereas this one was very clearly of that moment, which I appreciated.
Love a chunky spider on the back of Peter. Yeah, I don't like it to be reedy. I don't like it to be too much circle with little lines. Mm-hmm. Love a big chunky gold emblem S on the back of Superman's cape. I said it there. I'm gonna
I like it too.
Commit to that.
I'm okay with that. I'm with you there.
Yeah, so next we have to read, I want to read a Superman comic with a beautiful golden S. We should be a scavenger hunt. I just give you random, almost fairly useless aesthetic qualities that I want. And it has to be drawn by Barry Windsor Smith. There you go.
Oh my God. Well, it's going to be a lot harder right there.
Yeah, that's true. Never mind. Pick whatever you want. Maybe we're doing something Gwen Stacy. Who knows?
Maybe. Well, so it's interesting. Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, I definitely mentioned it, I guess, pre-podcast, that maybe our next book of the month will be Death of Gwen Stacy, or The Night Gwen Stacy Died, technically, is the first issue.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about that issue, and I'll repeat this for a future podcast, but the idea, and again, this idea of talking to the reader, which is obviously something Jerry would have learned from Stan, that if you read the first page of that issue, it's very like, we dare not even tell you the name of this issue. We cannot. Like, you know, there's just something about it that is hyperbolic, but not too much. It's just enough to kind of make you enticed, make you interested. And when you get to then, it's like, this is why we couldn't tell you what it was called. For we wish we never had to write a story that was called The Night Gwen Stacy Died. Like, it's, I don't know, there's just something about it. I really like that sense of voice that comics Marvel Comics in particular, used to communicate with you, and specifically Spider-Man comics in a different way.
I mean, there's a certain charisma to the P.T. Barnum of it all, right? And Stan was his own P.T. Barnum. He was his own charismatic voice. Mm-hmm. And it was very much the second-person voice of you, dear reader, you, Mary Marvel, Marching Society, that made Marvel something special for so many kids, right? And so many youth at the time. So it does make sense that would be not just something that would maybe tickle nostalgia, but there is a proud tradition, right, in the House of Ideas of that. It stands apart from other companies, perhaps because of it. So why not? Yeah, it makes sense why you enjoy it, and I don't dislike it. I don't need everything to be this distance from the reader. It's fun to bring them in. Film has really struggled with that more recently. It's far more rare to see that kind of thing talking to the audience. I think it's also because film came out of an era where they were just trying to adapt stage plays for so long. Musicals and stage plays, like, now we have a camera, what do we do with this? And Hitchcock saying, no, there's a language of cinema, and we need to do that. Stop telling, just show. Stop telling. But the carnival barker, the P.T. Barnum, the showman is speaking to the audience, drawing you in. Come on in, come on in. And so I think maybe movies have moved as far as they can from that, and comics oscillates, right? It easily tries to do this kind of, just to mention like Malibu Independence era, that's like, this is a crime show, right, for lack of a better term. We cannot speak to the reader, but I can see why the more fun comics, why not? Have them talk to them.
Yeah. It's interesting, though. So I was just taking a look at, what else could we do for our next Creator Spotlight, and I was like, well, you love Barry Windsor Smith so much, like maybe we do an episode on that. Who doesn't? And it's interesting from like a Marvel perspective or a Marvel work perspective. Like, for the most part, after 1991, he doesn't do Marvel work. At least looking at the Marvel app, he does a bit of Wolverine 166 in 2001, which is a Frank Thierry written story, but it's more just kind of a sequence as opposed to an issue. So it's interesting. The last, I guess, at least using Marvel Unlimited as our guide, the last full thing that he's credited for is the end of the Weapon X saga in Marvel Comics Presents. So if we do Barry Windsor Smith, that's the end point. We end on that. And actually the beginning
point...
What
about DC? Does he do DC after that?
Well, that's a good question. I feel like he didn't. I feel like he's done other stuff and other mediums and other... But
what did that guy do it?
I don't know. He's just too busy being so damn influential.
Yeah, I guess so.
Let me look him up quickly as we speak, this is great podcasting right here. Barry Windsor Smith. So, interesting. He's only 3 years older than Gerry Conway, so he's 77 this year. Let's see here. Ooh, born in Forest Gate, East London, England. Don't know if you knew that.
Incredible. No, I didn't. I guess that maybe there's that British connection that Claremont maybe would have really enjoyed working with him on projects.
But he would have come over and started doing comics again, like when he was like 20 years old.
Yeah, but like Claremont was like, what, 5? Like he's been younger when he came over, I believe. So it's not like they're like, countrymen in that way. I just mean like Claremont is an Anglophile. He really has a great affection for English things. So I wonder if that helped their working relationship.
So I don't think he did really do any DC stuff by the looks of it.
Okay. Well, I hope he's done well for himself and he's well for whatever he's doing. This is a key creator and director at Valiant Comics. His own projects at Dark Horse since 1991. And then a long gestating magnum opus, Monsters, in 2021. Maybe I should take a look at Monsters. magnum opus. So if we're going to find it, we're going to find his work post 91 in Valiant Comics and Dark Horse for the most part.
I mean, that's where everyone goes, right?
I guess so.
It's interesting, like, and some of the stuff that he's probably most famous for, we wouldn't be able to read in Marvel Unlimited anyway, like his Conan stuff, right? Like, his Conan stuff would not be there.
I would love to read that.
Well, I haven't gotten rid of them yet. I have a bunch of the original Marvel Years epics of Conan, and there's...
Wait, yes? You're going to get rid of them?
That was originally my plan, because I was never going to be able to continue with them because they stopped publishing them. So
maybe I should take a look at them. Maybe next time I come over, you're going to maybe have them on the table for a sweet gander.
I have to be able to get them out from where they are, but yes, that would be for a sweet gander. Wow, look at this guy. Okay, so it looks like... Hold on, I've got to look at actual United States comics here. So his stuff is reprinted everywhere, but where is it actually? Epic Illustrated, that's still in the 80s. All right, here we go. He worked for Acclaim and Valiant on Solar Man of the Atom. That was 1991, so that's right after he finished Weapon X. He went and did that. He did some Exo Manowar, also at Acclaim and Valiant. He worked on Unity, Archer and Armstrong, so a bunch of stuff at Valiant at that point.
I'm interested in this 360-page graphic novel, Monsters. I have not seen any pages of it, but now I want to look. This has now become a Barry Windsor-Smith podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way we go, right?
It's okay. Jerry would have been honored to have Barry discussed as well, I'm sure, because of the work that they did together.
For sure.
Making some of the coolest Kazar comics ever. And certainly some of the best stuff about Garrock,
Oh yeah, I'm much more interested in this.
Petrified man.
I'm much more interested in this Garrock than anything else I've ever seen with the character. Like, I was more invested, to be honest. Like, I don't know. It was more interesting. And again, the art was a big part of it, but the story was really engaging and fun. And yeah, I really dug it. It's interesting. When I was looking at the art, though, it did make me wonder what it would look like on newsprint, because it wouldn't look as garish. Like some of the high, like, as bold as the colors were, they would obviously not quite look as, as bright, and they look a little bit more subdued, and maybe that would be actually almost more fitting. But that would be interesting to take a look at.
Hey, dude, if you want to read the rest of these at some point, I mean, I'm going to read them anyway and talk about them, and then maybe do a Kazar episode. We can do some of the work, Mark Waid and Andy Kubert series. We can do a whole Kazar-a-thon.
I like the idea that Mark Waid is surprised that anyone ever talks about his Kazar. Loved Kazar.
One day I'll find Volume 2. I need you to use that Hawkeye of yours to find me a Volume 2.
Will indeed. All right. Thank you for joining me for this episode, and thank you, listeners, for joining us as we've done Tangents Aplenty, as well as talking about, the sad passing of Gerry Conway. He had a tremendous life with so much work provided that we get to go back and experience, whether it be comics or TV, and unfortunately taken too soon. But again, we can read his work and remember everything that he's kind of given us as a creator. You can email me at comicshenanigans@gmail.com, rate the show on Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.